I know this may surprise you a little bit, but I actually really enjoy the online progressives right here on YouTube. While I don't find their content particularly interesting or particularly enjoyable, I find them incredibly easy to make video responses to because they all seem to suffer from an incredibly oversimplistic worldview. Now, with that being said, among all the online progressives, I do have my favorites. Obviously, you guys know I like the Young Turks because their overreaction and emotion and anger that's completely misplaced, coupled with their terrible lack of being able to report basic facts, makes great content for me to respond to. But I actually also really enjoy Kyle Kulinski because, like all of the other online progressives that I'm typically making responses to, he is lacking in information and he has an overly simplistic worldview. However, unlike all the other progressives that I might respond to, Kyle Kulinski is the one who inspires all of these other progressives. So they all essentially repeat his talking points verbatim because for some reason, people think Kyle Kulinski is this magical policy wonk. He's some genius on the issues, and if you just repeat Kyle Kulinski, because I guess he sounds kind of smart to them, then you'll sound kind of smart on the internet. So when you're debunking somebody like Kyle Kulinski that everybody else downstream in the YouTube ecosystem repeats from, you're basically debunking everybody else downstream in the YouTube ecosystem. Which is why I'm going to go after two specific videos. Of course, these videos are on polling because Kyle Kulinski is obsessed with polling, despite the fact that he doesn't have the fortitude to, look into the polling to see what it's actually saying. And I just want to contrast what he's celebrating to what he's not telling you, and then tell you about the other thing that he's celebrating because it's a complete misread of what the actual polling information said. And we'll start with this first video, which is on the ballot initiatives that were on the ballot this election cycle, that Kyle Kulinski indicates, thinks, believes in his heart of hearts are actually an indication that America is really progressive, and if the Democrats, if they just ran on the progressive agenda, they would totally win. They'd win every election. I mean, just look at the ballot initiatives.
I already told you guys how direct ballot initiatives really were good the other night on election night. We got marijuana won on every single ballot it was on. Legalizing all drugs won in Oregon. Decriminalizing magic mushrooms won in one or two places. I know D.C. is one. I don't remember the other one. It was a clean sweep for the correct position on the direct ballot initiatives. In Florida, we had over 60% voted to raise the minimum wage, so now the Florida minimum wage is going to be raised. Amazing. I mean, this stuff is just great. I did miss some, though. I missed some other direct ballot initiatives. I learned about them today, and I can't wait to share this with you. Colorado voters have approved a new paid family and medical leave law. The measure had the support of 57% of voters as of 9:30 p.m., with a sizable lead of nearly 400,000 votes. Under Proposition 118, Colorado would require that employers provide 12 weeks of paid time off for childbirth and family emergencies. 8 other states and Washington, D.C. have created similar programs in the last 2 decades. I am happy for the workers of Colorado, said State Senator Faith Winter, a paid leave proponent. The new law will ensure that mothers don't have to return to work mere days after giving birth, she said, and that cancer patients can take time to heal. 12 weeks paid vacation. That is so awesome. Overwhelmingly passed, 57%, 400,000 vote lead. Probably will be more when all is said and done. That's awesome. I have more for you. Arizona voters approved a tax measure this week that will raise rates for the state's wealthiest households. So they voted directly on raising taxes a little bit for people who make over $250,000 and using that money to help fund the school system. Passed. It passed. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it passed.
See? America's progressive, and the issues that Kyle cited right there on the ballot initiatives show that America's progressive. Minimum wage in Florida, raising taxes on the rich in Arizona, marijuana passing in medicinal and recreational form every single place that it was on the ballot. America's progressive if only the politicians on the Democrats would just run on the progressive message and they would totally win every election. Why aren't they running the Georgia election on raising the minimum wage? That should be the number one obvious issue for the state of Georgia. 15 jara minimum wage for the state of Georgia. If you want to vote for the Republicans, you won't get that. You won't be able to criminalize the labor of the underskilled people because that's progressive. But here's the thing, picking out ballot initiatives from the states that highlight the priorities that you like, that actually went the direction that you wanted them to go, only works if there aren't conflicting ballot initiatives in other states that show the exact opposite. And remember, I never claimed that the ballot initiative was the best way to tell anybody's position on anything or the American people's general views toward politics. I've always said that top-line poll questions are incredibly misleading, and ballot initiatives are essentially top-line poll questions. So I'm not going to argue, like Kyle Kulinski is arguing, that America is secretly conservative based on the ballot initiatives in California that I'm going to show you, because that would be just as dumb and misleading as Kyle's position that America is secretly progressive based on the key ballot initiatives that he's highlighting.
Marijuana was a clean sweep, minimum wage won, paid family leave and medical leave won, raising taxes on the wealthy won, and giving that money to the school system won. I'll tell you what, I will take the American people over the corrupt corporate politicians in America any day of the week.
But what are the ballot initiatives in California that I'm talking about? What issues did California residents, California, one of the biggest Democratic stronghold, actually vote against the progressive position and in favor of the market position? Because, you got to judge the tree by its fruits. They might have voted something a little bit conservative, but it might not necessarily be indicative, if we were using Kyle's formula, that everybody in California, or at least the majority of people in California, are actually secret Republicans. Well, here are some of the issues that California's residents actually voted on, and where they broke down, and why you can understand my skepticism that ballot initiatives indicate where a population is overall in the nation. Californians voted down replacing cash bail. They don't want people to be able to be let out of jail without there being a cash bond held against him. And not only did they vote this down, but they voted this down after the legislature had passed it, so they just did not want this to be there. Californians also voted down affirmative action. Bringing back affirmative action in their state lost pretty significantly, and that is even when you factor in the fact that the polling, or the question that they were actually voting on, was unbelievably misleading. They called it the End Diversity Ban, as if the state of California banned diversity in their public institutions. No, this was a ban on race-based affirmative action. This was an anti-discrimination provision that in the state of California they passed, and the result of them passing this was that Asian students would no longer be discriminated against in the state of California when it came to certain things like higher education. It's an excellent piece of legislation, and even with that bad framing saying that they banned diversity, which is not true, Californians voted overwhelmingly, 2.4 million more people, against bringing back affirmative action in the state of California. Now, does this mean that California is a Republican stronghold because that's an obvious Republican position? No. How about worker protections? Is that something that you think is on the progressive docket? Well, it turns out 60% of California residents, nearly 60%, almost 3 million more voters, voted to let Uber drivers remain independent contractors rather than employees. This is obviously something that the progressives have been pushing for, to make them regulatable employees in a way that they're not as independent contractors, but the overwhelming majority of Californians voted in favor of letting them work out their own arrangements with Uber based on a contractor basis. How about raising taxes on commercial property owners? Do you think that's a progressive position? You see, in the state of California, unlike many states across the country, they don't actually reassess the property's value in order to charge the owner of that property more tax revenue from year to year. In California, the way it worked is that when you bought the property, whatever price that was the taxes you paid from year to year on your property taxes. Now, California put up a ballot initiative in order to change that, because a lot of progressives thought that this was completely unfair, because rich, long-term property owners were paying less in taxes, and they thought American people, Californians, they're gonna want to raise the taxes on those evil rich people. They even wrote in the ballot initiative some total nonsense that should not be allowed to be on the ballot initiative, that this was going to pay for local governments and education. Total nonsense, total non-starter, totally misleading and biased in favor of the progressive position, but it turns out even with everything cutting towards progressives in the way that this is framed, they voted against raising property taxes on commercial property owners. Lowering the voting age is a big thing that the progressives are pushing nationwide in this country. They've actually introduced legislation in Congress in order to get this passed. However, California decided to go with a little bit more moderate approach. They weren't going to make it 16, they were just going to make it 17, and they weren't going to do it for the general election, they were just going to do it for primary elections. Now, this much more moderate thing, compared to the progressive agenda that everybody's behind because everybody's progressive, surely passed, right? Nope, it failed too. How about rent control? I'm told by the progressives that greedy landlords, they're the ones raising rent. It has nothing to do with the absurd building regulations in the state of California, and specifically in high rent cities in California. It's all about those greedy landlords, and something like rent control would be a solution. It lost by nearly 60%. Over 3 million more voters voted down rent control in the state of California because they know it's ridiculous and it would be counterproductive. Now, if I was delusional and for some reason I had this compulsion to tell you that the American people already agree with my agenda, I would say that California is actually an incredibly Republican state, and we just don't know it. We just pretend they're liberal because that's what the media tells us. And what Republicans really need to do in the state of California is run as strong Republicans, not moderate Republicans, to appeal to this lefty base that obviously doesn't exist. Now, obviously, I would have to ignore the other ballot initiatives that went the other direction in the state of California, and I'd have to ignore this nationwide if I were to extrapolate that. But that's essentially what would make me the inverse of Kyle Kulinski, because make no mistake, that is exactly what he's doing by highlighting these ballot initiatives. Truth be told, top line issues on polls, which are what ballot initiatives are, don't tell you anything about how the voters are going to vote or what they believe in. They're just gut reactions. And in the state of California, they have like freaking so many of these ballot initiatives, it makes no sense. Like, you're supposed to hire representatives. That's what you do when you elect them in order to pass your will. All these ballot initiatives just create lazy representatives because they can always kick it to the voters and let them decide, and that way they can never be blamed for anything.
Fox News did some election night exit polls, and I don't think they went how they wanted it to. So here we have a nice screen grab from Fox News. Fox News voter analysis results. You see Jesse Waters on screen there. Voter analysis, national. Changing to a government-run healthcare plan. Strongly favor 39%. Somewhat favor 33%. Somewhat oppose 14%. Strongly oppose 15%. So in other words, changing to a government-run healthcare plan. Favor 72%.
Now, the other big takeaway, the big proof that allegedly Americans are super progressive, is this Fox News exit poll that showed that most Americans support Medicare for all. 72% of Americans support Medicare for all. And that's even with Kyle Kulinski saying that the question is unfair for being accurate, that it would be the government running the healthcare plan.
72% want a government-run healthcare plan. I need you to understand something. That question was phrased to scare people off of saying yes. And they said yes anyway.
Now, as I pointed out repeatedly when it comes to Kyle Kulinski or anybody who likes to trot out Medicare for all polling, and I did this specifically with the Kaiser Family Foundation polling, which all the progressives said showed that the majority of the American people wanted Medicare for all, is that what that polling actually shows when, you scroll past the first line of questioning, is that the American people don't actually know what's in Medicare for all. And when you poll them about the specific things that go with Medicare for all, Bernie Sanders' plan, the polling drops down significantly. In fact, there's actually a direct correlation with knowledge of the plan, of what's actually in it, and opposition to the plan. The people who support it know the least about it, and the people who know the most about it support it the least. The polling overwhelmingly shows that what people actually like is the name Medicare for all, which makes a lot of sense because they called it Medicare for all and not single-payer healthcare, because Medicare is a popular program in the United States of America. But when you actually go into the numbers, they prefer, and when I say they, I'm not even talking about the American people, but the Democratic primary voters, the most enthusiastic Democrats, prefer Joe Biden's plan to Bernie Sanders' plan. So call me a little skeptical when I see that a Fox News poll, which, by the way, it's an exit poll, it really has nothing to do with anything that Fox News conducted it, shows that 72% of the American people support Medicare for all. And this is just what the progressives have been saying all along.
It's all in the framing, guys. So if you were to say, oh, do you want socialized medicine? That makes it more likely people say, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. But if you say, here, I'll give you a more benign framing. Do you want universal health care? People say, oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, duh. The way they phrase this, I would argue, is perhaps even more nefarious than socialized medicine. Government-run healthcare plan. Government-run. It sounds like, oh my God, the government's going to make all the decisions for you and you can't even pick your doctor. This is crazy. That's what it sounds like. 72% favor, only 29% oppose. We're getting to the point where even when they try to frame it in a misleading way, the correct side wins.
So once I saw Kyle crying about how this question was so unfair to the progressive position, but the progressives are so strong in America that even with this unfair Fox News framing, the progressive position won out. And if you were to frame this like a Bernie Sanders campaign commercial, because according to them, that's not biased, even though it's literally not telling you the bad things and only emphasizing the things that they think poll well to tell you, then it would be like 97, maybe it would be 120%. Because America's so progressive, man, they would support it more than the actual population, according to Kyle Kulinski.
We're getting to the point where even when they try to frame it in a misleading way, the correct side wins. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, just so everybody knows. You will see instances where things are phrased in a misleading way and the results will be misleading. But this is an instance where people even overrode the misleading framing of it, which is hilarious.
Unsurprisingly, based on everything that I've known in the past about Medicare for All polling, they're totally wrong about what they're saying, because the question asked was actually not even the question put up on screen for Waters. And you can look this up, it will be linked in the description. There's only 2 healthcare questions on this poll. But the question asked was the following. Do you favor or oppose each of the following? Changing the healthcare system so that any American can buy into a government-run healthcare plan if they want to. 70% strongly or somewhat in favor. 30% strongly or somewhat opposed. Unsurprisingly, this idea, this myth that the left likes to cling to, that the overwhelming majority of people support Medicare for all, is just that. What this question was actually asking was about the public option. The buy into if they want to portion is a key indicator. What happened on Fox News is that they tried to shorten the question in order to fit the graphic, even though that shortened version of the question completely changes the question, even though they're using the results from the public option question. So no, 72% of people did not say in an exit poll conducted by Fox News that they support Medicare for all. The overwhelming majority of people said once again that they support Joe Biden's public option, which again is also misleading because once you actually have to, put something into place and fight for it legislatively, it could end up costing you. The majority of the American people supported healthcare reform, but that still didn't prevent Barack Obama and the Democrats from losing all the seats that they lost from actually passing it. There's a big difference between something in the abstract and when you actually legislate for it.
If you're efficient and you're effective and you really believed in these things and fought for them, you'd win in honestly, FDR-style landslides in every election. In every election. FDR only lost like 2 states in 1936. 2 states. 2. Because people realize, oh my God, he's helping us. He's fighting for us. He's doing the New Deal. He wants to give people jobs. He wants to give people hope. He wants the second Bill of Rights, which is basically an economic Bill of Rights. Give people a right to medical care and a job. I mean, he was crusading for social democracy and maybe even beyond social democracy. You could make an argument he was a democratic socialist, not just a social democrat.
Now, Kyle Kulinski all pumped up on misleading information that he was too lazy to look into, by talking about how FDR was probably the most social Democrat politician in American history, and on top of that, he might have actually been a Democratic socialist, and he won 4 times, so much so that the Republicans had to change the rules in order to stop him, because FDR was fighting for the people. Once you have the people on your side, it's impossible for you to win. All that corrupt deal-making and all that nonsense, no, that's modern times, that's corruption. FDR is the way to go.
So, the last time we had a social democratic president, he won 4 times, and the Republicans had to come up with term limits because they thought we'll never be able to beat these guys again if we don't have term limits. Isn't that something? And they don't want to tell you that history, because then you'd be telling the Democrats, no, I want you to stand for something. See, the Democratic Party, post-Reagan, and definitely with Bill Clinton and onwards, they became the triangulation party, the centrist party. They almost embraced the label of we're corporatists and we're center-right as opposed to the far-right Republicans. And they viewed that as like, oh, we'll always split the difference. We'll always be above the fray. We'll always find the middle path, and that's how we win.
No, that is not in any way an accurate description of FDR or the constituency that he actually had to string together. This guy compromised all the time, but don't take it from me. Take it from excellent YouTuber Stephen Michael Davis, who you can subscribe to down in the comments below, and this video that he made where he talked about FDR's constituency and all these people that FDR had to compromise with and bring together in order to pass the New Deal legislation.
It's interesting that some people contrast the FDR vision of the Democrats to Bill Clinton's third way New Democrat approach to politics. First of all, the people who do this oftentimes have a trivial understanding of the New Deal coalition that FDR formed. Specifically the fact that it was the most ideologically diverse coalition to ever exist in American politics. According to Wikipedia, it included Democratic state party organizations, city machines, labor unions, blue-collar workers, minorities, racial, ethnic, and religious, farmers, white Southerners, many of whom were segregationists, people on relief, and intellectuals. This is the coalition that got FDR elected 4 times, and progressives want to throw Elizabeth Warren off the island for calling Medicare for All a framework. Second of all, it's an interesting comparison because the 2 presidents have something important in common. Bill Clinton was actually the first Democratic president to be elected to a full second term since FDR.
If you think there wasn't some shady backroom deals going on in order to keep a constituency together that contained the Dixiecrats, the Ku Klux Klan, black people, other racial minorities, religious minorities like Catholics or Jews at the time, then you don't know what you're talking about. But again, all this video has shown me, or these 2 videos have shown me about Kyle Kulinski, is that he's still incredibly naive about politics and doesn't really understand polling. But hey, those are just my thoughts and opinions. They happen to be 100% factual and correct, so if you disagree with me, feel free to let me know your wrong opinions down in the comments below. If you like this video, you know what to do. Like it, share it, subscribe for more content. You can support me. Patreon actually has an annual membership. It's pretty dope on Patreon, and all the other support links in the description. This has been me talking about Kyle Kulinski, not knowing how to read polls, but of course taking the message he wanted from them. Till next time.